really, maybe except for the very last page where we do some word problems, I consider as practice. So my advice is when I go to a new page, just pause it, work them out yourself real quick to make sure you're okay, and then watch my answer to see if you got it right. So I'm going to look at this as more of just practice. You have to practice these on your own. Now, if I look at B, capital B here, I'm working from left to right. This is all addition and subtraction. There's no multiplication, no division. So I'm going from left to right. Another way of handling it, if you like this better, is you can group together all your positive numbers. Let me highlight. So I got a positive 5, a positive 15, and that's it. So I could group those two together, 5 plus 15, and I could group my negatives together. Okay, so I've got a negative 24, and a negative 3, and a minus 12. Now, what's the difference between plus and negative and minus? There's not. Y'all, they're both dealing with negative values. That's the best way to think about it. Okay? Now, the positives, we know right here, 5 plus 15 is 20. I can do that. And then I can work on this part. Now, remember I talked about keep, change, change? That still applies here. And this is the explanation for why subtracting something or calling that a negative number is the same explanation. Watch this. So I'm going to keep what's to the left. I'm going to change addition, and I'm going to change that to a negative. So see, that is just a negative 24. Now here, this is addition. I don't want to change that at all. If I do, I'm doing it wrong. Okay, addition you don't touch. But this is subtraction, so I keep, I change, I change. See what I mean? How the subtraction really is just a negative number? Okay, so it's just another way to think about it. All right, so the plus I'm going to bring down, the orange one. Now I'm adding negative 24 plus a negative 3. Remember, the signs are both negative, so I add 24, 3 is 27. And then I'm adding on top of that a negative 12. So that's going to be a negative 39. Try it again. 24 and 3 is 27. 27, 12 is 39. They're all negative, so negative 39. Then I have to add a positive to a negative. Now remember, when you do that, you actually subtract the numbers. 39 minus 20 is 19. The heavier one is negative, so negative 19 is the result. Alright, so how'd you do on C down here at the bottom? So notice this is a little different. Let me highlight this. This has got a set of parentheses. We need to handle what's in those parentheses first. So I'm going to recopy the first part exactly the way it is. I can't emphasize enough to recopy what you haven't done anything with, because it's like a brand new problem. Negative 2 plus a negative 8. Notice I'm already adding, so there is no keep, change, change here. Already addition, I'm adding two negative numbers together, which gives me a bigger negative number. So negative 2 plus a negative 8 is a negative 10. I just add. 2 plus 8 is 10. I keep the negative. Now what operation are you handling? So don't look at your first problem. Now look at 8 plus 3 times negative 10. And that's what I was going to ask, is what operation is here? That's multiplication. What do you do next? Do you add or do you multiply? Well, we know you need to multiply, right? So this is 8 plus, and 3 times negative 10 is negative 30. And then these are opposite signs. No keep, change, change, because this is not a subtraction problem. What it is you're adding a positive number and a negative number. When they're opposite, you actually subtract. 30 minus 8 is 22. The larger one of the two is negative, so my answer is negative 22. D is very similar. So I highlight what we're doing first here. We have to do negative 2 minus 7 first. Okay? Well, we can do that. Matter of fact, I'm going to rewrite it because that is a keep, change, change issue. Okay, so in parentheses, I have negative 2 minus 7. That's a subtraction. So again, keep, change, change. So I keep my negative 2. I change my subtraction to addition, and I change the sign of the next number. So it turns out I'm adding negative 2 plus a negative 7, which is a negative 9. Okay? Now, what operation is happening here? That is multiplication. Remember, we reviewed multiplication, so I'm recopying what I have. I have negative 5, and I have a subtraction sign. I'm multiplying, let me highlight this, 4 times negative 9. Now, a positive times a negative is a negative. So this is negative 36. Well, if I write it like that, it looks weird because I have this subtraction and this negative. So I put parentheses around it. My last step, or you can think about it as 2, is keep, change, okay, because it's subtraction. So I keep negative 5, I change subtraction to addition, I change the sign of the next number. Negative 5 plus 36, they're opposite signs, so 36 minus 5 is 31. The heavier one was positive, so my answer is positive. If you're getting these, now you should be doing them without a calculator, okay? You've got to, because if you're relying on a calculator to do signed numbers, you're going to flail miserably when it comes to factoring, which shows up in Math 100, or solving equations, which shows up 2 tests away from here. Please promise me you'll try these. You know, if have to, you can always go to your calculator to check your work, but you have got to be able to do these without a calculator so you truly understand what's going on with these numbers. Okay? Now, I got parentheses, so I got to do that first, and I have to do that first. And you think, well, which one do you do first? Well, they're independent of each other, so it really doesn't matter which one you tackle first. You can do them simultaneously. So I'm going to recopy because I got to keep change here. So I'm going to make it a little bigger so it's easier to look at. There's this weird 3 sitting out at the end. Now, 2 minus 6 is subtraction. So what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to keep the 2, change subtraction to addition, and change the sign of the next number. What does that give me? 2 plus a negative 6. When you add opposites, you subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. The heavier one, which is the negative 6, is negative, so I keep the negative. I can put parentheses back around it or not. I think it's safe to go ahead and do it. Subtraction, we'll worry about that later. Same problem here. This is a subtraction in the parentheses, so I'm supposed to keep change. I keep my 5. I change subtraction to addition. I change the sign of the next number. So what I'm doing is 5 plus a negative 7. I'm adding opposite signs, which means subtract. 7 minus 5 is 2. The heavier one is negative, so it's negative 2, and then there's weird 3 sitting out there. What about that weird 3? What's going on? I see that I have subtraction. I see I have some negative numbers, and I see I have this 3 just sitting next to this negative 2. That's multiplication, right? Anytime you have a number just sitting right beside a parenthesis, that means multiply. So I have to multiply before I can subtract. So I've got negative 3 minus negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. There we go. Now finally, I'm subtracting. But to subtract, I'm supposed to keep change. So I keep my negative 4. I change subtraction to addition. I change that negative 6 to a positive 6. And I can write this problem up. So these are opposite, right? So I subtract. 6 minus 4 is 2. The bigger one is a positive 6. So positive 2 is my final answer there. I hope you got these right. I'm about to go to another page where I ask you to pause and do the same thing. If you find that you're getting all these right, that's wonderful. Again, on your own, not with a calculator, okay? If you're not, then slow me down a little bit. I mean, stop me and make sure you understand every single step that I'm doing. And if you don't, please seek out some help, okay? Okay, fine. You got a brand new list. Pause it, do these 4 problems, and see how you do. Now that I'm looking at F, okay, I've got 2 sets of parentheses. Notice none of this is absolute value. These L brackets don't mean anything different than the parentheses. It's just different notation because more than one set of parentheses gets hard to look at. Why did I highlight the 3 minus 11? Because that is the innermost parentheses. That's what I need to do first. But here's the problem. It's subtraction. So subtraction, I'm supposed to keep change, right? I'm going to do it right on top of my problem this time. I'm going to keep my 3, change a subtraction to addition, and change that positive 11 to a negative 11. And then I'm going to rewrite every other part of my problem identical to the way it's already in the problem. Just not as neat. So what is 3 plus a negative 11? How do you do it? Well, it's opposite signs. So you subtract, right? 11 minus 3 is 8. But it's a negative 8 because then 11, the bigger of the 2 numbers, was negative. All right. Now I'm working inside, highlighted in yellow, here. I've got to do that next because it's in those brackets. Now, the only reason the parentheses are here is to separate this subtraction sign from this negative sign right here. This is a keep, change, change again because we're subtracting. So what am I doing? I'm keeping my 10, I'm changing subtraction to addition, and I'm changing the sign of the next number. So it turns out that I'm just doing 10 plus 8, which is 18. So the 35 minus 18, okay, I just recopy. Why'd I leave the brackets? Well, because they were there. Are they really needed? They're not, because notice this 35 is not right next to the bracket or the parentheses, so it's not multiplication. It's just 35 minus 18, which you know what that means. It's another keep, change, change, because you're subtracting. So I keep my 35, I change my subtraction to addition, I change that positive 18 to a negative 18. So essentially I'm subtracting 35 and 18. 35 minus 18 is 17. 35 is the bigger number and it's positive. So positive 17. I hope that's what you got for that one. There was a lot going on with the keep, change, change. In the past several problems, there's been a lot going on like that. Now look at this next problem. It can be confusing. I'm seeing multiplication. I'm doing G. I'm seeing subtraction down here. Remember, you got to multiply before you can add or subtract. So I'm going to do 6 times 3. I'm going to do 4 times 5. And I'm going to do 8 times 2. Because multiplication comes before addition and subtraction, which turns it into actually not a difficult problem. 6 times 3 is 18, minus 4 times 5 is 20, minus 8 times 2 is 16. What do I do next? Well, my advice is left to right, because that's what you should do right here. But this turns out to be a keep, change, change problem, right? Because you're subtracting. Now, a lot of people think about it this way. 18 minus 20 is negative 2. If you have $18 in your checking account and you write a $20 check, you're minus 2 in the hole, right? So a lot of people know that's minus 2 already. And it's okay if you know that and you don't keep, change, change. If you don't know that, that's okay too. You keep, change, change. So I keep my 18, I change subtraction to addition, and I change the sign of the next number. And remember, when you add opposite signs, because this is positive and negative, that means they're opposite, you subtract. 20 minus 18 is 2. Why did I make it negative? Because the bigger one, the 20, was the negative number, so that's negative. The minus 16 I just brought down, and now I have another keep, change, change. So I keep my negative 2, I change my subtraction to addition, change the sign of the next number. Now these two guys match. They're both negative, so I add them together to get 18, and since they're both negative, negative 18 is the final answer. Next problem, H. I have to do what's in parentheses, so negative 2 minus 7 is going to be my first go. Now that's a keep, change, change. I keep my negative 2, I change subtraction to addition, I change the sign of the next number. When I go to the next line, I recopy exactly what I haven't worked with yet, even the parenthesis after the 4. Now, negative 2 plus a negative 7, those are the same sign. They're both negative, so I add to get 9. But since they're both negative, it's a negative 9. Now, what operations? I've got a subtraction and I've got a multiplication. A lot of people have a hard time seeing that, okay? So the next thing I have to do is this operation right here. I'm multiplying 4 times a negative 9. So the negative 5 and the minus, I just recopy. The 4 times the negative 9 is negative 36. Remember, a positive times a negative is always a negative. Whenever the signs are opposite, it's negative. And I'm not supposed to put a subtraction and a negative sign right next to each other, so parentheses there. And then my last step, I have this keep, change, change issue going on. I keep my negative 5, I change subtraction to addition, I change the sign of the next number. And now I'm adding a negative number and a positive number, which means I'm really subtracting 36 minus 5 to get 31. The bigger of those two was positive, which means my final answer is positive. 5 squared is 25, minus 7 squared is 49. Why did I do the exponents first? Because parentheses, then exponents, then multiplication, division left to right, addition, subtraction left to right. So that's where we are. Now it's a keep, change, change. I keep 25, I change subtraction to addition, change the sign of the next number. So essentially this is a subtraction problem. So 49 minus 25 is going to be 24, right? The bigger of those was negative, so my answer is negative 24. Again, my best advice is to pause now, work these out, because the more practice you have, the better you'll feel about these order of operations problems, and the better student you'll be when we move on to other topics. So how'd it go? Well, I've got parentheses and I've got parentheses, right? So what that means is I got to do those separately. But now I got to keep change again because it's subtraction. So 7, change plus, negative. 7 plus a negative 11. Those are opposite signs. So I subtract 11 minus 7 to get 4. The 11 was negative, so negative 4. That was in parentheses, so I'll write it in parentheses again. Nothing between these two sets of parentheses, so that's essentially multiplication. 7 minus 12, I got the same problem. I'm subtracting, change it to addition, change the sign of the next number. 12 minus 7, because these are opposite signs. 12 minus 7 is 5. The bigger one's negative, so that's negative. Now I'm multiplying two negative numbers together to get a positive 20. Okay, coming below, I'm going to highlight this set of brackets right here. Why? Because that's what I have to do first. Then you say, well, there's parentheses in there. Why aren't you doing that first? Well, there's nothing to do inside. That's just negative 1. There's no addition or subtraction. That's just negative 1. Well, why are they there? Because this is multiplication. This is 7 times negative 1. As a matter of fact, that's the first thing we got to do. So I got 9 minus 3, bracket, 4 minus, and then 7 times negative 1. Remember, a positive times a negative is always a negative, so that's a negative 7. Now I'm still working inside this big set of brackets right here. Well, that's a keep change because it's subtraction, so I'll keep the 4, I change subtraction to addition, I change the sign of the next number, and now I have 9 minus 3. That is not 6, by the way. You cannot say that's 6 because this is multiplication. And you have to multiply that before you can subtract. That's where people go wrong on a problem like this frequently. So be super careful. Don't say 9 minus 3 is 6 and then decide you're going to do everything else. Subtraction is one of the last steps you do. 4 plus 7 is 11. Okay, and like we said, we have to multiply this before we can subtract. So this is 9 minus 33. And that's a keep change. So I keep the 9, I change subtraction to addition, I make that 33 negative. And then 33 minus 9 gives me 24. But since the bigger of those two numbers was negative, I get negative 24. If you missed that one, check on your 9 minus 3. Make sure you didn't say that was 6 at any point because that's not right. And that's because you did not perform order of operations correctly. If you got that right, awesome. You're doing great. If you didn't, just make sure you understand why and we're ready to move on. When I look at a problem, y'all, I'm looking at P. I go through and I quickly analyze what operations I have. I have division, I have addition, I have division, right? What comes first? Well, division always comes before addition. Remember, my dear, multiplication and division are the same level. If you have both, you work them left to right. Addition and subtraction is the last step. They're the same level. If you have both, you work them left to right. So really, what I have to do is this and this first. So 65 divided by negative 5. Well, first of all, is that positive or negative? A positive divided by negative is always a negative. And then 65 divided by 5 is 13. So 65 divided by 5 is 13. Again, a positive divided by a negative is a negative. The plus just comes down. Now I'm doing negative 28 divided by negative 4. Now, first of all, remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Because remember, when the signs match for multiplication and division only, the answer is positive. If the signs are opposite, the answer is negative. And these signs are the same. So my answer is positive. 28 divided by 4 is 7. And now I have a negative 13 plus 7. Now this is not a keep change, right? It's already where it needs to be. It's addition. When you add opposite sign numbers, you actually subtract. So 13 minus 7 is 6. The heavier of the two is negative, so negative 6. Now moving down, what do we do first? Well, I'm noticing I've got some parentheses here, and I got parentheses here. Now the parentheses with the negative 4 squared are actually only telling you to square negative 4, not just 4. So there's no work to do inside that first set of parentheses. So what are we supposed to be doing? Well, we're supposed to be just leaving that alone for now. Remember, use grouping symbols first. So I'm going to recopy negative 4 squared minus 24 divided by, and 2 subtract 6. Now that's a keep, change, change. Now a lot of you know if you have $2 in your checking account and you write a $6 check, you're minus 4. A lot of you know that already. Or you keep the 2, you change subtraction to addition, you change the sign of the next number. When you add opposite signs, you subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. But the thing is, you keep the sign of the heavier, so that's negative 4. Now, a division sign right next to a negative sign looks weird, so I use parentheses. And the next step that we would have to do is exponents, right? Parentheses first, then exponents. So negative 4 times negative 4 is a positive 16. Careful here, because it's not just 4 times 4 and you bring down the negative. Negative 4 times negative 4 is a positive 16 because the negative times negative is a positive. Minus, I'm recopying, 24 divided by negative 4. Now what operations do I have? I have subtraction and I have division. Division comes before subtraction all the time. So the next thing I'm doing, highlighted in green right here, is this step. So I have 16 comes down, the minus comes down. Positive 24 divided by negative 4. Positive divided by negative is always a negative, so I put this extra parenthesis to separate these two operations right here. 24 divided by negative 4 again is negative 6. Keep change, change. Because it's subtraction, I keep my 16, I change subtraction to addition. I change the sign of the next number. And overall, this is just pluses. 16 plus 6 is 22. And that's my final answer there. Okay, folks, now I've got to evaluate. So I'm supposed to remove the variable, y in this case, and replace it with a negative 21. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing I do. So I've got remove the y, negative 21 plus a negative, well, let me write this properly, 12. All right, there we go. Now I just simplify, which is addition in this case. So I'm adding the same sign, which means my answer is negative. 21 added to 12 is 33. My answer is negative 33. Next problem S. Again, I have an A. Uh-oh. Typo. That's supposed to be an A. Just pretend like that's always been an A. And I'm substituting in negative 12 for my A. So I have negative 12 plus 5. Hey, no problem. This is just addition. No keep, change, change required. Opposite signs, which means I actually subtract. 12 minus 5 is 7. The heavier of the two is the 12, and it's negative, so negative 7. Let's try it again. I have a negative A right here. Actually, let's back up. I want to be more careful about this for you. I have an A. The negative is just part of the equation. I have an A, and I'm replacing A. Oh, look. I was bad. I was getting tired a bit. That should be an A also. Okay? And I'm replacing that A with negative 5. Alright? So the negative that's out in the front, not highlighted, comes down. The A is now replaced with negative 5. So I write that, but then I realize I can't have these two guys just sitting together. I have to put parentheses there. And then plus a negative 8. Now we know these cancel each other out, right? That's like saying the opposite of 5, which is just 5 plus a negative 8. You're adding a positive number and a negative number together, which they're opposites, which means you subtract. And you keep the sign of the heavier one, which is the 8, which is negative, so negative 3. All right, evaluate again. I've got an X that I'm going to replace with negative 5. And I've got a Y that I'm going to replace with negative 2. So right now, it's just being sure that you copy this correctly. So I have parenthesis, which is in the problem, negative 5 plus a negative 2. What's up with those parentheses around the negative 2? Well, I'm not allowed to put plus and negative next to each other. It just gets too confusing. So there we go. I had to add extra parentheses. Now, I'm working inside the parentheses first, so I have to add negative 5 plus a negative 2. Well, I can do that, no problem, right? I'm adding two negatives together, which means my answer is negative. 5 plus 2 is 7. and I have to square it. Why did I leave that -7 in parentheses? Because I'm squaring the 7 and the negative. So -7 squared, which remember means -7 times -7, is positive 49. Positive. Negative times negative is always a positive. All right, here's some more evaluate problems for you, at least 2 on the left. It's worth trying them on your own. Remember, what you're doing is you're substituting the value that is suggested, for example, x equals -3, in for the x that they gave you. So take a minute and do those. Now, I've got this x. I'm replacing it with -3. If you always put parentheses when you substitute, you will never go wrong. So -2. Now, in this case, I have to, because that's multiplication. -2 and nothing in between it and the x, that means multiply. Plus 19. So I have to put parentheses there. If I didn't, it'd look like -2 subtract 3. And that's not what we're doing. So -2 times a -3. Remember, 2 negatives multiplied together to give you a positive. And then 16 plus 19 is 25. Now, why did I multiply this before I added the -3 and the 19? Because multiplication comes before addition. Now, this next one, this is called a polynomial. This one was too, but we recognize these as polynomial. It's got the second power in it. I've got 2 different places I have to plug in my w. So there's a w, and there's a w. And what am I plugging in? -3. So first, let's make sure we write it down correctly. So I have a 3, and then I have this w now, which is -3, and then the 2 on the outside. That's an exponent. Minus 2. And then again, I can't just put -3 there because it looks like I'm subtracting 3. I have to put parentheses -3 plus 6. Now I have to do order of operations. Now what comes first is always parentheses, but look inside these parentheses. There's no work to be done. They're just there to separate the number from other values. So what do? I square. So I have to handle -3 squared. Exponents next. So that's 3. -3 times -3 is a positive 9. And I'm recopying the rest of the problem. Now I have to multiply, right? I can't add and subtract. I have to do any multiplication. And there's 2 different sets of multiplication we have to handle. 3 times 9 is 27. Minus, and 2 times -3 is a -6. Now, again, parentheses required there to separate that subtraction from that negative, and then bring down the plus 6. Now, I've got this keep, change issue going on because I have a subtraction, so I keep the 27, change subtraction to addition, change the sign of the next number. I know 27 plus 6 is 33, right? And 33 plus 6 is 39. So my final answer is 39. Okay, we're almost finished. The sum of 6 and -9 increased by 8. Wow. Okay, so the sum of 6 and -9, what does this say? The sum of 6 and -9, sum means add. So I do 6 plus a -9, and then increased by 8 means we add 8. So it's just 2 different ways of saying add. So the sum of 6 and -9, we did that, and then we increased that by 8. Now we do the work. Now, a positive plus a negative, you subtract the 2 numbers. 9 minus 6 is 3. The heavier one was negative, so -3 plus 8. We have that same story. We're adding a positive and a negative and positive. This time we subtract the 2 numbers to get 5. The heavier of the 2 numbers is positive 8, so the final answer is 5. Okay? The difference of 11 and -14. Difference means subtract. And you keep when it says the difference of, you keep the same order. So I put 11 first, minus a -14. What's up with the parentheses? I have to keep my subtraction sign and my negative sign separated. This is a keep, change. I keep 11, I change subtraction to addition, I change the sign of the -14 to a positive 14. Now I'm simply adding a positive 11 plus a positive 14, and I get a positive 25. And that's my final answer. This is the last page of problems. I just want you to see some of these short word problems. 4 less than -8. Now, these are the dangerous ones. Whenever you read less than or more than, your problem is kind of backwards from the way you read it. 4 less than 8 means negative 8. That means you take negative 8 and minus 4 from it, because you're saying 4 less than that number. So that number has to go first and then minus 4. Now we simplify it. This is a keep, change, change because it's subtraction. Change subtraction to addition, change the sign of the next number. You're adding the same sign. You're adding two negatives, which means my answer is negative. 8 plus 4 is 12. So negative 12 is the result there. If I go down, the product of negative 3 and 12, what does product mean? It means multiply. So I multiply negative 3 times 12. We know a negative times a positive is always a negative, and 3 times 12 is 36. So negative 3 times positive 12 is negative 36. The quotient of negative 18 and negative 3. Now, whenever it says quotient, product, difference, sum, you keep the order that it's in. So the quotient of negative 18 and negative 3, you just put negative 18 on top, negative 3 on the bottom, or you could use the division bar. Nothing wrong with negative 18 divided by negative 3. We will get away from that, though. A negative divided by negative is always a positive, and 18 divided by 3 is 6. Last problem. The product, what does that mean? Multiply, of negative 5, okay, and the difference of P and Q. Wait, the product of negative 5. So what is the product? What two things are we multiplying together? So the product of negative 5 and the difference of P and Q. Those are the two things we're multiplying together. So we've got negative 5 times the difference of P and Q, means just do P minus Q. Now there's something slightly wrong with what I have written down, because overall we're taking this whole thing times this whole thing, which means I need parentheses. I got negative 5 parentheses P minus Q. Those might be the trickiest things that you do on this test. You got to be careful with that. All right, hope this helps out. Y'all have a great day.